What's going on YouTube? My name is Mr. Crippled and today I'm going to be bringing you my Zeus guide. Now before we get into the video, as always, if you like the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to keep up with any future content that I'll be putting out in the future, I will be leaving my Discord and my Twitch in the description below. Now, Zeus is very interesting in this game. He's still extremely unsafe with any lack of a real run move. And now his ranged options for clear are gone. However, what he lacks in actual mobility, he makes up for in pretty funny or pretty damaging builds, given the fact that how the game changed for him. And I think he's in a way better spot he is now than he has been since Smite 1. As usual, I'm going to be going over the passives and I'm going to be going over how his abilities function and basically doing small showcases for them. And I will be dropping a video of a crit Zeus video, which I'll be describing later in the video. But let's go ahead and get right into it. Starting with Zeus's passive, Overcharge. Basically, every single time you hit with an ability or a basic attack, you apply a debuff on them, making your damage increase by 20% per stack with a max of 3 stacks. So you can get a whopping 60% extra damage. And these stacks do affect how hard his autos hit, how hard his abilities hit. And he does get some pretty fun stuff if they're at max stacks when it comes down to his 3. Very crucial for his kit. You are going to have to hit autos. Yeah, you can get by with just hitting some of his abilities. But if you can hit autos and hit his abilities at the same time, he becomes a much bigger threat. And then before I really go into his videos, I do want to go ahead and note that Zeus's basic attacks do only scale with strength with a little bit of intelligence. So if you're going to go an ADC build with Zeus, it's better for you to do primarily strength scaling. As usual, I go in order from the ability that's the least important to the most important. For Zeus, all 3 of his abilities are pretty important since they all have pretty unique uses that are integral to how Zeus works. But if I had to put the least important ability, it would probably be his 2. Reason being is because his 2 is very close range. It does scale with intelligence, and it does give him a whopping 35% attack speed and 30% movement speed. So on paper, this is really nice. The problem with it is how close you have to be for you to be able to do damage with it. If you're just looking for the stem, it's fine. It does do the damage is secondary. But in all honesty, you're more than likely probably not going to be putting too many points into this early. You're probably just going to be putting the first point into it and then forgetting about it after you level the 3 and the 1. That being said, the movement speed and attack speed given to him is really nice and probably his only source of movement outside of items and relics. So while this might be his only way to get away from people, you're still going to have to pop this a lot when you're trying to mow somebody down. And as usual, I'm going to go ahead and showcase the ability. Now, if you look, the radius is pretty small and it only really affects him. So, and you had to be pretty close for a DPS for you to be able to do damage with it. That being said, it does do a pretty nice amount of damage. The bot's still level 1, so normally it doesn't do that much. It probably does like a nice little tick. And it does increase your movement speed. But in all honesty, again, you're not really going to be using this a lot aggressively. You can, but for the most part, you're probably going to be using this to get away. But it does give him a pretty good amount of attack speed if you look right here. And then after you pop it, it does increase his attack speed by quite a bit. So really integral for him to be able to be a good ADC, but not so much for the damage. Up next, I want to talk about Zeus's 1 Chain Lightning. This move is very important. Basically what it does is you throw a lightning bolt. If you hit somebody with it, god or minion, the bolt chains to other people, and it does apply a slow, and it puts the stacks of overcharge. So for every person that it hits, it puts 1 stack of overcharge, and it can bounce back at another enemy. It can bounce back at the same enemy twice. You just have to basically space the abilities properly. The bounces will not proc on the same person multiple times if there's no enemy types that's near them. So using this for the slow is nice, but you really want to be using this when they're grouped up with their team or grouped up next to the wave. That way you could maximize the use of this ability. And now I want to go ahead and showcase the ability. The line is pretty small, so this is a skill shot if you're just trying to hit one person in a one-on-one. Most of the time, you're going to be using it on the wave, using it on groups of people, or trying to get the proc off of a minion. That way it bounces between them and the minions. You're really not going to be using it in a one-on-one situation. You can just to apply the slow to make you a lot more obnoxious. But for the most part, you want to use this on grouped people. And like I said before, using it on one person doesn't proc the extra bounces. However, if you have multiple people, go ahead and spawn in the god bot real quick. And I'll spawn another one right here. So if you look, and then you pop your one, as you can see, it bounces up to 6 times. You kind of, what you call this? It only bounces up to 6 times, so it can, as you can see, it actually procs multiple charges of overcharge, which is going to be very important for your 3 and your autos hitting harder. Up next, I want to talk about Zeus's 3, the most important ability on Zeus. If you played against him in both Smite 1 or Smite 2, having the overcharges on you with his 3 up is the scariest thing. Basically, it is an instant hit. It tracks. It never misses unless you have unless the other person has Aegis. This damage at level 1 only does about 170, which really isn't too much to cry about. It's when he has max stacks of overcharge on you. Yeah, basically the damage on this goes up depending on the number of charges. So if you only have 1 charge, it only does by 1, so it only does that 170. If you have 2 charges, it goes up by 1.7, and then at 3 charges, it does a whopping 2.4, an extra 2.4 times the normal damage. And then on top of that, when they're at 3 stacks of overcharge, it actually stuns. So it's a big damaging ability that can stun and set your team up very, very nicely. I still need to test to see if the charges can stun multiple people. In most cases, you're probably going to be focusing on one person, even though he has a lot of AoE in the form of his ultimate and this one. If you manage to get all 3 charges on multiple people, that's great. But in most cases, you're probably going to be focusing on one person trying to stun them. I do believe that if everybody has max stacks of the charge, they will end up getting stunned, and I'll go ahead and showcase that here in a moment. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and showcase the 3. So, as you can see, without any charges on anybody, the ability is marked red, basically telling you that it's unavailable. But the second you hit an auto or an ability, that ability is going to come off cooldown. So, as you can see, 1 auto. Now he has 1 charge of overcharge on them. And how you can tell is basically these little 3 circles that are underneath the enemy god's health pool. Once all 3 are charged, that's how you know you're going to get the max damage and the stun. And after further testing, yes, if multiple people have the 3 charges on them before you pop your 3, they'll all be stunned. And I'm going to go ahead and showcase that now. So in most cases, you're going to activate your 2, throw your 1. And as you can see, all 3 have charges on them, and all 3 get stunned. Still does a pretty decent amount of damage. You can get charges from other sources as well. You know, hitting autos, hitting your ability, hitting any and all of your abilities. The charges do not last forever, however, so keep that in mind. So if you're gonna go an intelligence build on him, and you want to keep spamming your 3 for guaranteed damage, you need to make sure you have CDR. Now the last thing I want to talk about Zeus is his ultimate. Pretty gigantic AoE, this ability being able to hit 5 times over 4.5 seconds. Each tick doing anywhere between 100 and 220 per damage, or per strike. And it scales with intelligence. This ability is good for multiple things, for kill confirming, to set up for team fights, to block off an enemy's retreat. And this ability does put stacks of overcharge on people. So the more times his ultimate hits, it's going to do more damage, since you do get a 20% damage increase. So the longer you can keep them in this ability, the better. In most cases, to really maximize this, you want to throw the ult and then throw your 1 to maximize the slow. If you want to troll and really be for team utility, you can put Gem of Isolation on, even though I really don't recommend it. But to be able to get the most out of this, you want to save your 1 before you throw your ultimate. And here I want to go ahead and showcase it. Now, as you can see, this ultimate has a huge radius. And you can throw it pretty decently far. It's still relatively close, so you kind of do have to be in a really unsafe position for it. But the AoE on it more than makes up for it. And it does pretty decent damage. Again, striking 5 times and then going away. And then they are at max stacks of overcharge. There is still multiple uses. If you want to try to get as many overcharge stacks as possible and then throw your ultimate, that's fine. If you want to throw your ultimate and then throw your once and see if they can get all the damage from the ult, that's fine too. If you want to get the max stacks of overcharge, stun them and then throw the ultimate, or throw the ultimate then stun them inside of it, that's also nice, but then you're going to lose out on the damage on 3. There's multiple different ways you can use this ult, but for the most part, this is a team engaging ult. You can use it to kill confirm, but it's better for you to save it for those initiating fights or for blocking off pathways. And now, finally, I want to go ahead and talk about his builds. Now, I do have 3 different ideas for builds for you. Instead of going over generic builds, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what to build. For your starter, if you're going for more ability-based, you're going to go Sands of Time or Conduit Gem. Personally, I like Sands of Time better, just for the extra CDR since you want to spam ability as much as possible. Conduit Gem is good for damage, but Zeus's cooldowns are relatively long. The 3, your most important one being on a 14-second cooldown at level 1, or a 12-second cooldown at level 5 or level 20. The 1 being on a 12-second cooldown, the 2 being on a 12-second cooldown. Cooldowns are relatively long, so having Sands of Time is just really nice. There is ways around that, which I'm going to show you, but in most cases for me, I'm going to build Sands of Time and then eventually Pendulum over the ages. Up next, for intelligence, Book of Thoth. Book of Thoth is really potent on all mages right now. There's not really a case where you're not going to build this, since you do get pen, a crazy amount of intelligence, and a crazy amount of mana to help you sustain a lot longer in lane. So there's really no point not to build this. If you're not really worried about it, you can go Doom Orb, but in comparison, it's just not as strong. Up next, it's up to you where you build from this point. Me personally, I like going into Chronos Pendant for the extra cooldowns and for the passive that reduces your cooldowns by 1 second every 10 seconds. After that, I've been put on to this card right here, Cosmic Horde. This is new to Smite 2. Does give cooldowns, intelligence, and mana, so it does stack well into your Book of Thoth. But if you have more than 225 intelligence from items, you gain 15 cooldown rate, which is really insane when you think about it. And with Book of Thoth, you're gonna easily get over that. So definitely build this next. After this, you're gonna need some pen. You're gonna need a lot of pen to make up for the lack of penetration that you have now. Personally, I like building into Spirit Deso next. That way, whenever you do get kills, your cooldowns are reduced even further, and plus it does give a pretty healthy amount of intelligence and pen. So personally, I'll build this next. After this, Totem of Death or Obsidian Shard would work. Totem of Death is nice if you want the extra cooldown rate. As you know, there's not really a cap on cooldown at the moment. So having this after spamming your 2 and then your 1, your 3 is going to hit insanely hard. Or if you just want the power and just have a guaranteed pen rate, Obsidian Shard is also there. Either one of these works in this slot. Me personally, I like going Obsidian Shard just for the extra power. Next, and your final card is between 2. If you really want to deal with tanks and deal damage to their health, Soul Reaver is right there. That way you can actually be a threat to tanks more often than not. If you're just looking to just power spike yourself out, Rata-Tahuti is right here. Gives mana, intelligence, and pen, while also increasing your intelligence equal to 20% of the intelligence from your item. So this will damage spike you really well. And plus, since it does give you mana, it will build really well into Book of Thoth. And this is going to be basically your build for pure magical. Up next, I want to talk about his troll build, the Crit Zeus build. Now, this build is a lot more viable than I thought it would be, since his autos do scale mostly with strength, and him having a stun and attack speed stim kind of makes the Zeus ADC meme more of a threat than what it already was. And if you want to go down this route, then I'm going to help you out now. So, for the starter, you're either going to go Death Toll or Leather Cow. Personally, I'm more impartial to Leather Cow, since it does give you some extra movement speed and attack speed while you're next to somebody, and gives you a lot more survivability on that front. Plus, later on, It gives everybody a attack speed aura, and then increase the amount of movement speed you get. I do really like this, especially since it does give a pretty healthy amount of attack speed and strength. Death Toll is more if you want more sustain and having more mana control. And it does give you lifesteal on top of that. Plus, whenever you hit with a basic attack, it does reduce your non-ultimate cooldowns by 0.3 seconds for every auto. So this can be really nice if you want to be spamming that 3 as often as possible. But for the most case, they're gonna die before they even have a chance to get hit twice with your 3. So Hunter's Call is definitely the way to go. After this, you want to get a stacking item. Now, what you stack is completely up to you. If you want the mana and just the pure power and pen, Transcendence is right there. You can go Transcendence, and it basically works the same as Book of Thoth, except in this case, it gives you strength instead of intelligence. If you want sustain and strength, Devil's Gauntlet is also a nice one to go into. In most cases, when you're building a physical ADC, you want the Devil's Gauntlet. That way, you can have as much sustain as possible. Both of these items do give pen once you max them out. I do believe Transcendence will give you more power just because it gives you strength equal to your maximum mana. Since your mana pool is going to be very high, you are going to get way more power out of this. But the sustain is also really nice. Personally, I like Transcendence. Zeus isn't really meant to live for long periods of time, so having Transcendence is really nice. But boxing matches, Devos. Up next, you want to build Hasten Fatalis. Now, Hasten Fatalis is a bloated card. It gives strength, it gives attack speed, it gives pen, and then it helps you ignore the basic attack movement penalty. So if you're like me and you have struggle hitting autos, this can definitely help you out and help you keep up with people who are trying to run away from you. After this, I like building into Demon Blade. This just gives you the crit right off the bat. It gives you strength and attack speed, and whenever you critically strike somebody, you gain more attack speed. So pairing this with your stim, you're going to be attacking extremely fast. If you want more intelligence scaling to help your abilities hit a little bit harder, Death Metal is probably going to be the next best bet for you, given the fact that it is an active item. And then whenever you build into it and you activate it, you gain strength and intelligence and attack speed based off of your health, based off of your level. So this is really nice. Most cases, you're probably going to build Death Metal over Demon Blade, but in my opinion, having the extra attack speed is more important than just having the raw power spike. But either one of these cards work here. Me personally, I'm just going to go Demon Blade. After this, to help you deal with tanks, you need to have something that either hits their defenses or hits their health. In my opinion, Executioner is probably going to be the next best bet. Strength, attack speed, and whenever you hit an auto, you gain penetration against that person. This is probably the most common one to build. Quinn Size is a little bit more, or Quinn's Blade now is more expensive, but it does deal damage equal to their HP. So either one works. Me personally, I like Executioner better. After this, your last two cards are dependent on you. If you still want to be more damaging towards the tanks, Quinn's Blade is definitely the next best bet. If you want to just nuke down squishies, personally, you can either go Deathbringer here, or you can go Musashi's Dual Swords. Musashi's Dual Swords is nice because it does give a whopping 30% critical chance and 30 strength, but it also increases your movement speed whenever you crit. And so this paired with Hasten Fatalis basically makes it to where they can't run away from you if you're quick enough, and makes it to where you're even harder to hit when you're strafing. Deathbringer does give more strength, but a little bit less crit chance, but it does increase the critical damage that you do. You're going to be building Deathbringer either way, but Deathbringer is probably more of like a last card to build. So me personally, I would say that Musashi's Dual Swords is probably better here. Or again, Death Metal if you want the extra power. But for me, Musashi's Dual Swords. And then finally, you're going to build into Deathbringer. And just to showcase how hard this build really does hit, at least for squishies, I'm going to go ahead and set the bot to level 20. And just to show you how hard this actually does hit, a couple autos. And I didn't even need to pop your 3. And then even for tanks, even if they somehow get away from you, you have your 3 to rely on to get the last hit. And if they're not trying to get away from you and they're trying to box you, and you're starting to lose the fight after hitting a couple autos, you just pop your 3, and all of a sudden they can't fight you anymore because they're stuck. And the last build I want to talk about with Zeus is a hybrid build. Now this build is a little bit incomplete. However, I've been playing around a lot with it, and since he does have a little bit of the best of both worlds kind of thing going, I wanted to go ahead and showcase to you guys what I found. So, caveats to this build. One, this build is very expensive. It will take you a little bit of time to get this build going. So, in Conquest, you really need to know how to play safe, how to farm efficiently, how to rotate efficiently, and how to get gold efficiently. Another caveat to this is that the build that I'm currently going to showcase to you doesn't really have a lot of cooldowns, but still hits relatively hard. So keep those in mind. As the starters, you can either go Sands of Time or Leather's Cowl. If you really want to, reduce the amount of cooldowns that you're gonna have, Sands of Time is probably gonna be the better one, and it'll make your abilities hit harder at the cost of your autos. If you want to build more auto-like, which this build is going to be focusing on, Leather's Cowl was my initial starter. So for me personally, I'm going to be building this first. My fault. Let me go ahead and set myself to level 20. And then... where'd he go? Okay, here we go. So if you're going to go... For me personally, I like going into Hunter's Cowl. But if you want the cooldown, Save the Time is the next best thing. After this, you're going to be double stacking. Since you're depending on the starter you get depends on what you build first. So since this is going to be more auto attack focused and making your autos hit harder, me personally, I like going Transcendence. If you go Sands of Time, then you're going to go Book of Thoth. Either way, surprisingly, you're going to build both. If you want to sustain, you can replace Transcendence with Devourer's Gauntlet, but I highly suggest going into Transcendence instead for multiple reasons. One, Transcendence is going to hit a hell of a lot harder now because Book of Thoth and Transcendence are going to be building towards your mana pool. And since both of these cards make your intelligence and your strength go up depending on how much mana you have, having Transcendence just these two cards basically just complement each other, so you're going to be building both. After this, I personally like building into Bracer of the Abyss. Gives intelligence, attack speed, and a little bit of cooldown rate. Why this card is important is for the passive. Basically, whenever you hit an ability on an enemy god, you gain basic attack damage, which will pair really well with your Transcendence, making your autos hit harder, so this is going to be very nice. After this, you can either build Broggy's Harp to get strength and intelligence with a little bit of attack speed, and also doing additional magical damage. This would also be really nice, so I like building into this. Your last two cards are going to be scaled primarily into strength. Now, for me personally, I go Executioner and Quinn's Blade to round the build out. Basically giving you the pen, the extra pen, and the damage that you're going to need to help deal with squishies. If you don't want to build into strength and you want to go the more intelligence route, you can build Demonic Grip, which gives you more intelligence scaling and still gives you attack speed, which is basically the magical version of Quinn's size. And then you're probably going to go Totem of Death or Obsidian Shard to round out your intelligence. And again, I want to go ahead and showcase this build at level 20. Now, as you can see, since there's no real way to go ahead and get your stacks going in practice, I want to go ahead and showcase to you what that looks like without it. God, this training mode is horrible. Hold on. There we go. And apply. Alright, cool. So, okay, so I want to go ahead and showcase to you what this build looks like. And even though this doesn't look like it should hit hard, it definitely does. And this is only me throwing autos. You know, your ultimate, your 1, your 3 is still going to hit equally as hard. And you can still basically 100-0 somebody with this build. And kind of get the best of both worlds. Again, this is a work in progress. I do believe you can min-max this build a little bit more with the cards that are given. But keep this in your back pocket whenever you're trying to build somebody who's both who can be both a mage and an